Hey folks, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to The Human Show. My name is Trish, and I am a mom, a certified adult chair life coach, and an evolving human like you. And my intention is to raise the vibration of the planet by helping to expand the emotional intelligence of as many people as possible. I am here to hold space and share wisdom in support of your personal evolution. I know the path can sometimes be dark, so let's carry a light for each other and find our way. Here we go. Hey, folks. Thanks for being here. I'm super excited to be joined by a lovely guest today who was kind enough to share some time with me to talk about her experience of adversity, which is truly inspiring. So, Alison Beder Solway, welcome to the show.
Trish, thank you so much for having me. I'm very looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. Okay, so I have, a handful of questions, but before we jump into that, um, I will share your bio in the show notes. What I'd love for you to share now is just something you'd like people to know about you today.
I'm a mother, I'm an author, I'm a fitness professional, and I'm currently transitioning as my kids have come of age, that they're just finishing university and starting to get out into the workforce. I really don't love the term empty nester because it feels exactly like that, empty. I haven't properly coined a different term, so I should probably do that as I mentioned that I don't like the word empty nester, but I'm faced with a transition in my own life right now in that I'm able to dedicate more time for myself and for reinventing this part of who I am that doesn't solely revolve around raising my 4 children.
Yeah. I love that you used the word transition because that's what it is. And I agree. Empty nest has like sort of this kind of negative vibe around it. And
100%.
it is a transition. And I think
Yes.
to be able to look at it that way, then you see, a transition is there is grief and there is loss, but there is also like opportunities for new growth and expansion. And I mean, anything, right? Sky's
Very
the
much
limit.
so. Yeah, you're correct. It is a transition and it's an opportunity to
Yeah.
rediscover yourself or to discover parts of yourself that you haven't been able to connect with in a very long time or you didn't even know you had within you. Whether
Yeah.
it's your creative, physical, whatever it be, it's an opportunity to pivot into a different direction.
Yeah. 100%. Well, thank you for sharing that. And so the reason I asked you to join me today is because you have a pretty incredible story of adversity, and um, it's it's a lot. And I'm going to ask you a tough question, which is if you can maybe sum it up in about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll kind of get into some of the details, one by one, part by part.
Sure. Sure. I can try and be as concise as you need me to be. So my book, The Miles We Run, which was just recently published, is based on my life's story, or I'd say the most challenging part of my life to date. And that transpired over 26 years ago. And essentially, really to streamline, I had a very challenging pregnancy with my first child. And after her birth, I was diagnosed with a genetic condition and told that I could no longer carry any more children. So, The Miles We Run looks at my journey to motherhood through surrogacy, because that is how we had 3 of our 4 children. And then about 20 years later, I'm a runner, and I decided for my 50th birthday, I was going to run the New York City Marathon. And while I was training for this marathon, the same shared qualities that got me through surrogacy started to resurface. So patience, discipline, resilience, hope, so many things that I used to get me through a very challenging period of my life, although totally different than the choice to run a marathon. I still needed those same, I want to say, inspirations to get me through the training component of the NYC Marathon. And so I decided to use the marathon analogy throughout my surrogacy story, because most people will not use a surrogate to have their children, and most people will not run a literal marathon. But everybody runs a metaphoric marathon. Nobody has a flat road. Everyone has obstacles, hurdles, highs, lows. We all run marathons in our own way. And I felt that it really would help connect my narrative to the reader. And as a result, help the reader reflect on their own strengths and the resilience that they have as they've overcome the challenging obstacles in their life. So that is what The Miles We Run is about.
Yeah, thank you. That was an excellent summary. So thank
Thank
you
you.
for that. And so since I love the metaphor. Like I love the metaphor of a marathon to your challenge, your surrogacy journey, and and the parallels you were able to draw from them. And like you said, everyone runs a metaphoric marathon. So I think it's a really cool way to talk about transitions, because a lot of these challenges we face are some kind of transition. Something is being lost and something is being developed or grown
Or gained.
or gained. Yeah. And just what a cool metaphor.
Thank
I
you.
love it. Yeah. And I love, I read the book and I love how it is kind of laid out, 26 chapters, like 26 miles, and how, like you just said, you invite the reader to reflect, and you actually do. Like, I love how at the end of each chapter, there's like sort of a question of reflection for the reader. So it's
Yes.
sort of engaging them and, helping them to see where they could find some parallels as well. Right.
It was really important to me. I've always been an avid reader, and I like to engage within the story. And I always like to not necessarily parallel, because everybody's story is different, but look internally to what I share in common with, especially if it's a memoir, the story that I'm reading. Like, how have I been in a similar situation that I've gotten through, overcome, laughed about, can relate to. And it was the feedback that I have gotten from so many different readers of all ages. It's just been quite remarkable how they've been able to relate it to their own lives, whether they went through infertility or had a miscarriage or things, especially for my older audience, the women that are in their 70s and even 80s that have been reading my story, that went through, I do various speaking engagements, and I am just astounded by how many women had miscarriages, had trouble with fertility, adopted because they couldn't carry their own children, and no one talked about it. A woman would have a miscarriage in the 1940s or 50s and then make dinner for her husband. So, and this has been such an eye opener for me as well, because it's also given the space for them to talk about I'm speaking to this particular engagement that I was speaking at, but almost there was over 40 people, and it was an older audience, but almost every single woman in that audience had something to share about their journey to motherhood. And, infertility today there's still a lot of shame, and there's still a lot of grief. And even though it's talked about so much more now than it was 26 years ago when I was going through it, and even it wasn't really talked about at all, 50, 60, 70 years ago. So we've come a long way, but not nearly far enough.
Yeah. And like you said, so many readers or even people who attended your speaking engagements were really moved and maybe moved to share their own stories. And I want to thank you for putting yourself out there and sharing your story, because you're right, there's still a lot of shame around these challenges, fertility challenges, and a lot of women are afraid to talk about it for that reason. So
Right.
someone like you who gets out there and shares it, they can be like, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness it's not just me." And then maybe they can then be inspired to have a little more courage to maybe share their own story.
Mhm.
Because that's,
Mhm.
I think, so important in your healing process too, is being able to share it.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. I really didn't realize that until I started toying with the idea of writing this book. I journaled my entire surrogacy experience. The journals served as a keepsake. Well, the intention of the journals were to serve as a keepsake for our unborn child, so they would know how much love we had for them before their conception. And one journal turned into two, turned into three, and it allowed for me to have an outlet that was just a straight stream of consciousness to document every single thing that we went through, my feelings at the time. And once we had our twin boys and we were done, we had number 3 and 4, I put the journals away. I didn't look back. I just wanted to move forward. I feel that I had had enough heartache to last me a very long time, and I just wanted to be present in the beautiful family we had been so blessed with and had created. And I didn't pick up those journals again until my kids were starting to finish high school. One was in university, and I thought maybe now's the time to look at writing a book. And I didn't even know if it was going to be. I just started rereading my journals, and then I realized that I never really processed or grieved or worked through anything that I had been through.
Wow.
Infertility it's a very hard thing. When you're going through it, the only thing that you want is a child. And with that comes a desperation that's very hard to qualify with words. You will listen to anybody, you will do anything you need to, you will go to the ends of the earth to make this happen for yourself. And it's a very hard thing to have to go through on an emotional level and on a physical level. And because when you're doing IVF or you're taking any type of fertility meds, it changes your biology, your physiology. It just, a lot of hormones involved. And it's a very hard thing to go through when a woman's body doesn't work like we're told it should.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you just said that, when you want this so much and it's almost this desperation, you will go to the ends of the earth. And, for me, reading your story, I could feel like it felt like you did travel that distance. It felt like you went to the ends of the earth and back. And sort of like you were saying about a marathon and the ups and the downs, I could feel as a reader, every time I thought, oh, it's this, oh, I guess it's going to work out this time. And then it didn't. And then it was like another chapter or two, and I was like, oh, I guess it works out this time. And then it didn't. Like over and over. And I was feeling this like, oh, like this hope and then disappointment over and over, just as the reader. So I can only imagine the magnitude of this up and down roller coaster that you actually lived. So can you talk a little bit about that? And I'm sort of going to call it a roller coaster because that's what I imagine, and just the range of emotions that sort of you navigated and what helped you keep going.
The range of emotions were all encompassing. There were days of like absolute dread and depression and just so much heartache and sadness that we weren't achieving what I never anticipated would be so hard to achieve. And on that same day of feeling all those things, I would feel such unfiltered joy with my daughter, who definitely helped keep me grounded, because I explain this in the book that on one hand, I was so blessed to have a child, and everything was moving so fast as she hit her milestones and going to nursery and like all these things. It was moving so fast. And then our quest in having another child through surrogacy, it was moving so slow. So I was living two lives. I was living the infertility side, and then with my daughter, it was just all wonderful. Obviously, there was, hardships in being a new mother and whatnot, but all the wonderful things and I'm going to qualify them as all wonderful because that's exactly the space I wanted to be in. And that helped keep me grounded. And I was very lucky to have such a supportive husband who, was unwavering in his, I want to say support, but it was more than that. He just was like a rock for me throughout the entire thing. And he was my equal partner every step of the way. So I was very lucky to have that. And then our immediate family. I'm very close with my brother and sister, with my parents. We shared nothing of this. Our surrogacy journey was kept silent until we became pregnant with our second child. And the pregnancy was well into its 6th month before we said anything to anybody, because I just couldn't talk about it. It was too hard. All my friends were done or pregnant and with their seconds, and it was just too hard to be in that space with other people who, and I'm not saying they didn't have their challenges getting there, but it was very challenging for me to have to reconcile that I was not where I wanted to be, and that was where they were.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to ask you about was how your support system changed, if at all, like before, during, and after. And it sounds like Kenny was a constant throughout. So you had that, and then sounds like you had your family for support, and maybe outside of family that sort of shifted a bit, right? Because you decided to keep it private.
We did. We kept it very private. There was, people would ask me a lot whether or not we could have any more kids. And I never really answered with a proper answer. I know it all comes from a place of curiosity. However, it's just a question that I would never ask somebody, not knowing what they're going through. And because if I felt that they wanted to share with me, they would. And But again, this is a long time ago. And when everybody in your mommy and me group with your daughter is getting pregnant with their seconds, and you're literally the only one that is not, you know, you wonder what, and given the circumstance of my delivery, my birth, like Hannah was born 8 weeks premature and she was tiny. So my birth was not smooth at all. And many people knew that story. They just didn't know the aftermath. So, yeah, it was hard, but I can't say that my support system really changed. I think that once we shared the news that we were pregnant with our son Aiden, then there's obviously a lot of questions about surrogacy. You mean somebody else's genetic baby, and that you're, so then, and that's okay. That's how people get educated about. There's different types of surrogacy. There's traditional surrogacy and gestational surrogacy. And traditional surrogacy isn't really that common. That's when the carrier is genetically related to the baby. We used a gestational surrogate, so it was my egg and my husband's sperm, and they're implanted in a clinic. They're combined to make an embryo in a clinic, and then they're implanted into the carrier in a clinic. So, genetically, the child is ours, just growing in a rented womb, so to speak, for 9 months.
Hey folks, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to quickly share some news. I have created a small group coaching adventure to help women who are navigating divorce and breakup. There will be 8 weekly live calls with me. It's going to be transformative, and I am super excited. Doors are opening soon, so check the show notes for info. Okay, back to the show. Yeah, I mean, I learned a bit about it from reading your story, so I appreciated the education as well. So another question I had was about your boundaries and how they shifted. And you touched on this a little bit when you said when you started the surrogacy journey, you kind of maybe pulled back from some people because it felt, I mean, in any kind of challenge like this, there's a time when you need to really protect yourself. When there's a lot happening for you, you're processing a lot, you're moving through a lot, and you have a lot of uncertainty. So, can you talk about that? If there was like, maybe did you surround yourself with different people, or maybe not so much of the people who were having their second kids or asking you all the questions? Did you shift it a bit to kind of give yourself a little bit of a safe space before you were ready to share?
I really didn't. My closest friends, they didn't have their first child really until about Aiden, my son. So, like 3.5 years after, while we were going through this process. So, I made a lot of new friends after I had Hannah, and they've that was the group I was in. And then through Hannah's preschool, things like that, I started making new relationships with women who had children, like, because my life did such a pivot once you become a mom. And it's not that I didn't speak to my friends who didn't have children. It's just that I had a whole new friend group of friends with children. And I can't say that I really changed my boundaries. I held very true to not discussing what we were going through. I did not want to talk about it with anybody other than and that's, I guess, and I didn't really even talk about it with my immediate family. Like, Kenny was a wonderful sounding board. I sought out a therapist, which I speak of in the book, just to make sure my head was on properly, because it was a lot. And I got by. There were some very hard days, but I got by. I knew that I was going to find a way to have the family that I wanted. And I didn't set new boundaries really as a result of what we were going through, other than it wasn't something I was going to speak on. Now, once we let everybody know that we were pregnant through a surrogate with Aiden, then I felt that it was my responsibility to open those boundaries. And remember, we went through surrogacy in an age where there was internet, but there was no Google. So the getting information on all these like top clinics where they have their greatest chance of live pregnancy rates and the best doctors and the best embryologists, like that took me so long to compile. And I had like spreadsheets and contact people and nurse practitioners and doctors and, stats. And I had everything like that. So I felt I was obligated and I wanted to share it with the people who needed help. So then I opened up myself to anybody who heard about our story or who was going through infertility because, it's one thing to be going through infertility and needing a surrogate. It's another thing to just be going through infertility, but you can still carry a child. You just need some help getting there. And in the States in particular, there's different legislation in every state. So, I had research in surrogacy friendly states and non surrogacy friendly states where the top clinics were, and I shared all of that information for years because I felt it took me a long time to get there. It took me over 2 years to recognize that I hadn't educated myself. And I obviously speak to this in the book that I just kind of went in blind. The only thing I saw was a baby at the finish line, and I didn't ask questions. I wasn't curious. It, I look back on myself and I wouldn't change a thing because I wouldn't be where I am right now, but I can't get over how naive and ignorant and stupid I was for not doing my due diligence. Even though there was no Google or ChatGPT, there were still ways of getting information. And it just took us so much longer and connecting the dots and speaking to different people. And, so once we found success, and I believed that Aiden's pregnancy, because we had some issues early on with that pregnancy, was going to be okay. I was okay sharing our news, and I was okay sharing the information that I had gathered and I did. I helped so many other couples and women, be successful on their journeys to motherhood.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And what a powerful piece in your healing journey, too. Being able to connect and help other people.
Yes,
It's
very
just
much so.
really powerful.
Very much so.
So I'm curious I wanted to ask about your identity, your sense of self, because often hardships like this can really change us and can define us if we're not, how do I want to say this? Depending on how we can navigate these challenges, sometimes we can let it define us sort of accidentally. And then we become nothing more than this. And, from reading your book, it sounds like you stayed pretty true to who you are, but I'm curious your thoughts on that, who you were before the process. And then when you were deep into this, and then coming out of it, how do you see yourself and your identity? Do you feel like it changed, or maybe you redefined it?
That's a very good question. And I speak to this in the book because initially I positioned the experience of going through infertility and surrogacy as something that would define me, but not necessarily in a positive way. And then in the same paragraph, as I'm literally writing this as my narrative for the actual book, I realized that, you know what? This experience actually did define me, but in a good way, because it helped me recognize what I think I've always known about myself, but helped me recognize how resilient I am, and at least what I've achieved and gotten through and processed in the last 54 years of my life. I I can say that that experience did help shape who I am. It shaped the kind of parent I became. Resilience is a muscle, and you only grow and develop your resilience when you have to overcome a challenge. If your life is easy breezy and you have a flat road, which nobody does, you don't get a chance to be resilient and strong. So we all have it. I think sometimes we just don't recognize it within ourselves. And what I thought would define me in a negative way, in that, you know, this is all I wanted. I was holding on to hope. I was, desperate for another child. It did define me, but not in those ways. It defined me in my inner strength and my resilience and my grit and my determination and my drive. And I'm very thankful for that. Like I said, I would not change anything of the way we had our children. It wouldn't be the same. I wouldn't be the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you talked about resiliency as a muscle. And you're absolutely right. If you don't use a muscle, it's not going to get stronger. It's not going to develop. It's not going to grow. You have to use it. So, and resiliency is like that. So I love how you use that metaphor. And that's how we become more resilient, is by having to move through this tough stuff.
Exactly.
So I love that. Oh, before I forget. Who said that? 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 Who said that?
Yes.
You have a quote to share.
I do have a quote to share.
Okay.
One day you will tell your story of how you've overcome what you're going through now, and it will become somebody else's survival guide. And that is by Brené Brown.
Oh, I love that. I mean, and that's so, you've already seen that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are becoming a guide for others. I mean, and that's what this book has become. That's what you have become through all of your speaking and connecting and sharing your story. So you're living that. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. I hope what I'm living is that others will recognize their strength through my narrative. That's really what I'm hoping. I'm thrilled that I got the chance to narrate my story and to write the miles we run. But I truly hope that all my readers recognize their own strength within their own stories.
Yeah. I also have one to share. I had a few that I really liked, but this one just spoke to me. Life doesn't request your permission to upend everything you thought you knew. It simply does, compelling you to adapt to your new normal. But it is in that very upheaval and the process of unraveling and rebuilding where transformation germinates. You might recognize that.
I do.
Because it's your words. When I read this in your book, I was just there were quite a few things that I saved, but I just loved that so much as like a just what a beautiful way to look at your story and this it's where transformation germinates. It's like you were just saying, like all of this resilience and power and strength you didn't even know you had, but you had it. And this sort
Mhm.
of helped you unearth it and bring it to the surface. And it's made it's made all the difference. So I
It's
love it.
true. Thank you. And thank you for having that as your quote. That's very meaningful.
Yeah, for sure. I like I said, I had a few, and when I read that, I was like, oh no, I need to share this. So, okay, let me see if I can touch on a couple more things before we run out of time because I could just talk about the book for hours. So, oh, well, this is okay. I'm curious about this. So how did, if at all, how did any relationships change in your life during, I guess, during this process? Were there any relationships that changed? Maybe some that became disconnected or reconnected or strengthened or shifted at all?
Mhm. I uh, I don't know if anything shifted as a result of this experience. I think as we move through motherhood and we go through different stages and as we parent our each child differently because we show up as a different parent for each of our children, I I I think relationships change just as you walk through life. I don't know if it anything changed as a result of going through surrogacy and or even writing this book. I just think my life has evolved,
Mhm.
and some friendships have evolved with it and some haven't. And I just think it's a natural course of just everybody's experiences and where they are in their life and what they're doing and what they want for themselves. I think as we get older, at least in my experience, I'm much more I'm much more my circle is much less.
Mm.
I'm not so concerned with having so many friends. I'm okay with having a very small group of friends. And then I love seeing the people that at one point maybe had been a very close friend or, somebody who was very involved and active in my life because our kids were growing up together or we did a lot of things as a result of our kids being the same age. But I'm okay with as I get older, I'm much more introspective, and I think I recognize the value of time so much more. Like, when you're in the throes of raising your children, you're very focused on raising your children, and you until you get to the point where you can, like, look back and be like, Where did the time go?" Like, how are my youngest going into 4th year university and my eldest are done, and then recognize how quickly and fleeting time actually is and as your parents age, and so you want to I feel I'm much more selective in how I spend my time. So that's what's changed for me actually
Yeah.
is where I spend my time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for a lot of us, and often this is when we're younger, we do tend to have maybe larger circles. We're all trying to figure out where we fit, right? We're trying to find our
Mhm.
way. Where do we belong? Where do we fit? And as we grow, we start to develop the relationship with ourselves. We start to learn more about ourselves and connect with ourselves. And then I think naturally, like you said, your circle gets a little smaller because you've kind of found your way. You know where you fit, and you're
Mhm.
not like searching as much.
Or you don't care as much.
Mm,
You just you don't care as much. you're more okay with how things are, or how you spend your time, whether it's with a friend or whether it's not with a friend, whether it's at a party or not a party, whether you're invited or you're not invited. I but I do think we're constantly evolving, and social, being social is very important. There's no question about that, but it also depends on, what circle you have in your life. Are you close with your siblings? Are you close with your parents? Do you, there's, if you have one or two really good friends, or even one really good friend, that's a wonderful thing to have.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
people
I love,
with
go ahead.
no, I just people with like tons and tons of friends. Are they really all their friends? Or do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm sure they're meaningful relationships to a certain extent, but for me, again, I've definitely, I feel my circle is much smaller now.
Yeah. I mean, there's only so much of yourself you can share with others, right? So if you have
Hmm.
30 people, you're not, it seems like they're only getting little bits of you, or you're getting little bits of them, right?
Right.
So I
Right.
see what you're saying
Absolutely.
about like how deep, how valuable, how meaningful are those relationships? They may all be really important to you, but
Hmm.
it's like mentally and physically, and I don't think possible to to
Right.
have a,
I agree. I agree. You'd be
yeah,
spreading yourself very thin.
yeah, 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 for sure. Shoot, I had a thought and I lost it about on this topic. Oh, well, you were talking about how even if it's one person. So I love to talk about the power of community and how community, it could be 20 people or it could be one person, but it's someone else to connect with that you feel like you can be vulnerable with, because that's how we grow and heal, right? So you can decide how big your community is. And as long as you have one, whether it's one people or five people, and they're aligned and supporting you, that's what matters.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Yeah. Um, so there were a couple things I wanted to touch on from the book. Oh, one, I was really curious if you're still the shady lady.
Oh, that's so funny. I kept the trademark.
Okay.
So I own the name.
Okay.
No, not right now. That's not to say there wouldn't. It was served such a wonderful purpose when we weren't being successful in surrogacy, and it became very hard to keep up. Like at the time I used to make, just for your audience who doesn't know, like lamps, shades, and on vintage posts. And then I would have an electrician wire them, and I sold them to retailers throughout Toronto where I live. And people would come to my house and we would tailor make them, or designers for the room that they were looking in. But then a lot of merchandise started coming from overseas, from China, from India. It's not that they looked exactly like mine, but it was very hard to keep up. And then we were successful with our son Aiden before we had our sons Rowan and Caleb, and then things just got a little too much for me to manage to do it. And then I also, in addition to lamps, was ventured into the whole fashion thing because I've always loved fashion, making purses and belts and picture frames and things. Anyways, I loved it and I love the creative aspect of it. But no, it's the Shady Lady is and not in business right now, but never say never. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say that I never wanted to give up the trademark.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, and I loved reading about that because I think it was so cool how you found this creative outlet as sort of a way to channel your energy. And like at that time, there was a lot of uncertainty. You were walking through this like fog of
Right.
unknown, right? And it
Right.
was a way for you to focus. And
Right.
what a beautiful way to do it, by tapping into some creativity and being able to create things that brought joy to other people.
Right. It was actually just such a fluke because I literally started off making there was a couple IKEA lampshades that were bare in my house. And I thought to myself, wow, like what if I, put some butterflies and like I did up these lampshades and people would come over and be like, "Where did you get that?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I made it." They're like, "Well, can I buy one?" And my largest customer was ironically a kids furniture store, like a very high-end kids furniture and accessory store, and they were my biggest customer. So I
Wow.
was making all these children like gorgeous, like denim and gingham children's lamps that were flying off their shelves. So,
Wow.
mhm.
Yeah, it's such a cool story. Um, oh, there's something I wanted to mention too. I wanted to go back to how you talked about journaling, which I think it's so amazing that you journaled through the entire process. And there's a paragraph that I saved that I wanted to read because I thought it was really moving. Putting these thoughts down in my journal, I breathe a little easier. Transferring the words from my mind to paper seems to lessen their intensity and lighten their mental load. The act of journaling offers me a delicate yet invaluable solace, a space where fears and hopes coexist, neither one overpowering the other. I just thought that was so brilliantly written and I loved it. And just, I mean, your story, like, what an amazing advertisement for journaling. I mean, it's like journaling is not, it's a safe space, right? It
Mhm.
holds everything, like you said, your fears and your
Mhm.
hopes, everything. You can pour it out and it's
Mhm.
non-judgmental and it's just there for you. And also that you mentioned just kind of getting it out of your head. And I think a lot of times that can be so therapeutic because it's your head is spinning with all of this stuff and putting it out on paper can be this bit of a release, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. I still journal. I don't journal to the extent that I did when we were going through surrogacy, but every day I write 5 things that I'm grateful for. And I don't mean my health or my things that are obvious. I like the great cup of coffee that I had this morning, the run that I went on, that I pushed through a little farther than I normally go, getting through my workday, going to bed early, like really anything that makes me reflect upon my day. I do it before I go to bed that I can write down. It serves as also kind of a log as to what I do. And I've been doing this now for, I'd say, 15 years. So it really, it serves so differently than why I journaled our surrogacy experience, but it's still so important for me to recognize what I'm grateful or happy about or what's happened, in my day. Like if my kids drove home from school, they arrived safely, things like that. And it's only 5 bullets. So I can be as detailed as I want to be or as brief as I need to be. And I think it's like there's all different apps that do it, that have things like that. For years, I was just putting it in my notes until my husband, who's like a big techie, was like, "This is ridiculous. Here's an app. Put it in there." So I changed how I, now input my 5 points. But journaling is it serves so many purposes. It's almost like it's like a narrative of your life, really.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Okay. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, a lot of people will say things to the effect of life happening to them. These things happen to them and life happens for us. So I'm curious how you would say this journey, this challenge this experience of adversity, how this was for you.
So life does happen to us, but as life happens to us, we also get to make choices that direct what happens. So, yes, life happens, but sometimes we can't control everything, but we can control some things. And we can certainly control the choices we make and the lessons we learn regarding those choices. So, the lessons I learned from the experiences I've had specifically finding motherhood through a very challenging pregnancy and subsequent birth of my daughter, and then having my 3 boys via surrogate. The same surrogate carried all 3 boys, but it was very challenging to find the right woman to do this, and there were many bumps in the road. So I'd say I learned so many lessons, but I'd say the most important lesson that has remained, and if I could give anybody advice going through infertility or really going through anything in their life, is how it's so important to educate and advocate for yourself. And again, life does happen, but we are not without choices. And we get to choose to educate ourselves. We get to choose to advocate for ourselves in whatever situation you may find yourself in. And it hasn't, surrogacy was one lesson, my pregnancy was another lesson. Sometimes you need a few kicks in the butt to actually learn the lesson. But I have taken that component of education and advocacy now to really all components of my life, not just health. That I want to make sure that I advocate for myself in all areas, because nobody's going to advocate for me more than I'm going to advocate for myself. I know myself best. And I hope my readers take that message away. And anybody reading The Miles We Run recognizes the importance of becoming educated with whatever they need to educate themselves on, and then advocating on their own behalf.
Yeah, thank you. So the book is called The Miles We Run. I would highly recommend it for anyone who is struggling through infertility issues, any kind of pregnancy challenges, whether it's surrogacy or not. I feel like this is such a beautiful resource, and having this is like you're sort of walking alongside and being their companion. I mean, I kind of felt that reading it is like your voice is like sort of a friend walking alongside someone reading this who is actually in the journey. I think this could be incredibly supportive. So I will definitely share the info on it. And
Thank you.
yeah, it was really beautiful. Oh, and also I wanted to ask you about if you could share about ABS Fitness.
Oh, thank you for asking, Trish. So, ABS Fitness is a web-based platform, absfitness.ca. And when COVID started, I'm a fitness professional as my day job. And I started a platform when gyms closed and nobody could get out. So it's an online membership based platform for women 40 plus to get stronger. And there are all types of different strength training workouts that are very doable, very effective. And we didn't really discuss physical fitness, but as we age, it is so important for women to strength train, use weights. Doesn't have to be heavy. It can be heavy, but everybody starts somewhere. And it's me guiding you and leading the videos and I have membership all over Canada and the US, and it's been a wonderful it's a wonderful community of women who are getting strong.
Yeah. And people can find you on social media as well, right? Is it
Yes.
ABS?
So I have the handle on Instagram, at the miles we run, and then on the fitness side, ABS Fitness CA.
Okay. Okay,
Yes.
great. So people can connect with you in multiple ways. And oh, one other thing.
Yes.
There's another book. Your daughter wrote a book,
Yes.
Guide to Going Green,
That is correct. Yes.
which is amazing. So everyone, you have two books you need to get now, put on your list, The Miles We
Right.
Run and The Guide to
Right.
Going Green.
Yeah. Hers is a truly comprehensive guide as to what the average person can do to reduce their environmental footprint. It's a great, great book.
Yeah. And like super important right now. I think we all
important.
we all need that book on our
Yes.
shelf. So amazing. Yeah, amazing. Okay, great. So anything else you want to share before we wrap it up?
I think we've covered it all. Thank you so much, Trish, for having me on your podcast. I've loved our conversation, and I think the work you do is really meaningful.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored that you took the time to spend with me. Honored that I was able to read your book, and I think it's going to help a lot more women. So thank you for what you do. All right, folks, that'll do it for today. So as always, you are enough, just as you are, and you are loved. Make a great day. Hey, before you go, if you enjoy The Human Show, you can help me spread the word by sharing it and leaving a review. Thank you.